Hello, I'm Peter Junho Sang, founder and CEO of Beyond Form. Web3, one of the major key buzzwords of the last 24 months describing the next iteration of the internet. But what does it mean and how will it impact the fashion industry? In this episode, I'm joined by guest speaker Blake Lezenski of Outlier Ventures, one of the largest Web3 accelerators in the world, where we uncover how the fashion industry can leverage Web3 technologies. Digital assets, ownership and authentication are just some of the emerging facets of Web3, and there are now a whole roster of startups pioneering the space. Outlier Ventures' partnership with Farfetch and their joint acceleration program, Dream Assembly Basecamp, signals the potential importance of such technologies.
And together we want to endorse those projects as the answer to the most prominent needs of the industry, help them build exposure in the space while giving them the tools to capitalize on the immense commercial opportunities that unfolds in front of them at this point in culture.
I hope you enjoyed this episode with myself and Blake, and perhaps even start exploring Web3 for yourself. Okay, today guys, we have on the podcast episode Blake Lezenski talking about Web3. If you want to just say hi very quickly, Blake.
Hi, Peter. It's a great pleasure to be here and very honored to be part of the Beyond Form podcast.
So super excited about this specific episode because we're going to demystify Web3 a little bit. But before we get into the chat itself, I just wanted to talk a little bit about what is happening in the industry specifically. So for the Web3 and the fashion industry, experts are predicting that within the coming years that the global market for Web3 fashion is going to reach around $4.4 billion by 2030, growing at a compound annual growth rate of 55.4% from 2022 to 2030. And that's some research done by Research Dive. So that's a huge number. And I'm guessing, Blake, you'll talk a little bit about that later on. For those of our listeners, Blake is from Outlier Ventures, which we'll talk about that in a second, and specifically working as well with the Dream Assembly Basecamp with startups such as D-Commerce, Me Protocol, Nettle Numbers Protocol, Celeste, Spin Fashion, which is a Lablico company, and I know it as well personally, and
Woven.
Exactly, from Cohort too. Trying to get them all in very quickly. I think on the subject of Web3 specifically, does it mean digital fashion, which I think a lot of companies or industry professionals are interchanging between Web 2 and Web 3, and that's a little bit confusing. Does it mean metaverse? Does it mean gaming? Is it an AR filter on Snapchat or Instagram, meaning Web 3? And again, I think those things are interchangeable. So I think, shall we start with that first, Blake? For our listeners that are not familiar with Web3, what is it exactly and how will it impact the fashion industry?
Brilliant, Peter. And I'm sure there is more than one definition. And of course, my definition isn't perfect and also not an official definition of Outlier Ventures. But for me, Web3 is the next iteration of the internet, where not only you have the read and write permissions to interact with the digital space, but you can actually own aspects of it. Digital objects, own your own data, where you are self-sovereign in the digital space. From the perspective of user experience, it means that the digital and physical space intertwines and interacts with one another, where digital objects increasingly take on properties we know from the physical world, like scarcity, for example. So in my eyes, the key impact that has on the fashion industry is, first of all, the digital scarcity enables the creation of digital luxury. Digital objects such as clothing and wearables can also have specific utilities, like unlocking brand experiences or access to communities. For audiences, it's an opportunity to reinvent and express one's identity in the digital space. It improves the externalities of fashion and creators' economy by providing new ways to create, express, and engage for brands. It's an opportunity to extend their most valuable asset, the brand IP, into a whole new communication mode with their audiences.
For our listeners, it is still quite a new sector for fashion to be exploring, and it's great people like yourself partnering with obviously Farfetch as well are exploring the space. So then For our listeners that are thinking, oh, this sounds like an interesting topic, I might want to
Mhm.
get more into it. Like, how did you actually start off? What was your journey, Blake, into this whole field and into Outlier Ventures?
It would be my pleasure to share. So I would say that the fashion journey started a bit earlier than the Web3 journey, which I think makes sense in terms of the calendar dates. So I've always demonstrated a passion for fashion as means of identity expression. Gradually, I shifted away from consuming fast fashion to designing my own custom clothing and seeking out unique fashion items that are tied to local cultures and cultural influences around the globe. And with time, I also started making not huge, but meaningful fashion tech investments as a business angel. And my Web3 journey started when I left my career in corporate venture capital in the energy and clean tech industry out of pure interest in the blockchain transformation. So I started my own advisory, helping founders and investors integrate blockchain and crypto into their strategies and value propositions. Um, but there was also a moment when I left the space to work for Uber. But when the NFT bull run started, I came back to the space, and not for short-term speculative gains, but for people that it brought into the space, creators and artists. It made a very unlikely combination with all those genius technical developers that previously led the growth of that space. And in my eyes, what came out as a result of those two streams converging is an industry of future-minded thinkers that question existing socioeconomic paradigms and attract the most competent people globally while still showing kindness to a fellow human. And that moment when it all connected for me is when Outlier Ventures invested in Ouroboros, and having seen the first digital fashion show at London Fashion Week. At this point, I began actively learning about the challenges of the space. I joined the advisory board of the Metaverse Fashion Council and have had the honor and pleasure to lead the OV execution side of the Farfetch Dream Assembly Basecamp program. My beginning with Outlier Ventures specifically was actually by making an investment in their portfolio as an angel and then coming on board to figure out the best practices and ways to build programs with a partner. Because back in the day, we only had one in-house program and we grew immensely since then. I think when I joined, we were about 20 people, and right now we're close to 100 full-time equivalents. So it was busy days for Outlier Ventures the last couple of years.
Like super busy, like it sounds like. I love that because you've essentially seen it from all angles as a fashion person and the industry, from the tech elements, as an angel investor, so more of the entrepreneurial funding side of things. And I think it does take all of those different elements to make a category like Web3 come to life, especially when it's nascent. It's very confusing still for a lot of professionals in the fashion industry, like similar to you as well. Like I kind of like have a similar path where I was in fashion and then got into whole technology sort of things like expedited from there. Like, was yours just a pure curiosity of technology and Web3 and blockchain and how it can impact on fashion, or did it just, how did that whole thing come about?
I believe that was always my dream and passion to kind of be at the forefront of the technology. And even
Mhm.
though, as you said, sometimes it's confusing, and we always kind of put emphasis that it's a space of continuous learning. It's not that there is one person that knows everything. Probably they claim to know everything. There might be an element of risk in believing that. But together, if you invest in kind of learning as a community, you can really get past the point of curiosity and get to a deeper knowledge and expertise. For fashion in Web3 specifically, I think what really attracted me is how authentic people are. In other industries, sometimes one might feel like there is an individual personal version of you and there is a professional persona. In the fashion space, I do feel like you're being rewarded and kind of encouraged to be your authentic self. And I wouldn't trade that for any money.
Yeah, I think that authenticity is a interesting element. So let's just move on to Outlier Ventures then. So a lot of our, because it's not fashion, Outlier Ventures, so a lot of our listeners probably don't know what it is. So can you just explain what that is, please?
Oh, of course. So with Outlier Ventures, we started investing in the space very early in 2014. And as we grew, we started investing on a VC scale. In 2019, we came to realize that we accumulated so much amazing, rare expertise on board that an accelerator model is when we can add the most value to the teams we invest in. Since then, we have become the global leading Web3 accelerator. We are also the most active Web3 investor by the volume of deals. And we currently have an ecosystem, portfolio ecosystem of more than 220 outstanding Web3 projects, larger than any other accelerators globally. So in many ways, we are the experts in the Web3 space. We have been around for quite some time, and we have an amazing in-house team of subject matter experts from token economics to engineering, legal support pertaining to the best practices in the market, fundraising strategy and marketing support. And of course, for each program that we're running, we built a dedicated system and ecosystem of mentors. And I do have to say, for the Farfetch Dream Assembly Base Camp, that ecosystem of mentors is world-class, top of the category, and absolutely instrumental as part of the program.
Yeah. So I know that we've obviously had a previous conversation about this in terms of what's exciting you, but maybe that's changed now since I last spoke to you a couple of months ago. So within the Web3 space and of course fashion, like what is exciting you at the moment?
So yeah, great question. And I think currently my excitement is covering two broad areas. One is the improvements in technology that will mature the space and grow them for all the participants. And the other one is some of the verticals that might not immediately scream fashion or luxury, but actually have an immense growth opportunities in the space. So to give you more specifics, I'm very excited about luxury data economy, anything that optimizes the data relationship between the brand and the client while bringing them closer to one another and making the relationship deeper through data insights, customization forms, etc. I am super excited about community tooling and content experience, how we form digital communities, how they interact with one another and within, what kind of digital user experience they can bring, and do they result in new co-creation modes for the creators economy, and maybe realign incentives for those actors to drive more creativity in the space. I'm super passionate about digital infrastructure that enables the growth of digital fashion. So scalable standards and technology layers that grow the space for everyone, enable more individuals with diverse backgrounds and skill set to participate in the growth of that space. Technologies around digital identity, self-expression, avatars and assets, how we can create more utility for the users, more modes of engagement such as social commerce, and how can we help those assets and user personas travel across virtual environments. And finally, sustainability through Web3 technology. What use cases of blockchain, if done correctly, can extend the life cycle of a luxury product and enable more people to participate in it through circular fashion, secondary sales, and rental luxury.
There's a lot happening there. So you mentioned digital fashion, 3D assets there. And just going back to my intro at the start of this episode, for example, with digital fashion, many people do equate it to Web3, but digital fashion isn't necessarily always applied in a Web3 way. So I guess where are the boundaries between, like Web2 and Web3 and digital fashion? Like, for example, is an image with a digital garment Web3, or does it have to be a 3D asset that you actually own? Like, what are the nuances there to demystify that a little bit?
So yeah, you're right. There is a lot of nuances. For example, a 3D file of a beautiful dress is not a digital wearable if you cannot wear it in any of the virtual environments. Can you own it? Can it have attributed utility? These are all the questions and subtleties. But I think on a higher level, nowadays where e-commerce is all prevalent and enable the consumers to get access to luxury goods at a click of a button, for example, on the Farfetch marketplace platform, the audience expects every interaction with a luxury brand to be an experience. We no longer interact with the brand just to consume the goods they produce, but also to align our self-image with the values and brand associations that this company represents in order to expand on our individual identities. So in the technology space, this presents an incentive for luxury brands to compete on the experience front through a mix of digital and physical elements. The brands also show the need to build brand loyalty with younger customers that were born into the world of social media and gaming and are mostly digital natives with a strong drive to adopt new technologies. So this represents an immense opportunity for technology builders that, with the support of VCs, provide the technology components for the brands to reinvent themselves for the new generation of clients and connect with them through channels and platforms that they were raised with and spent most of their time on. So in many ways, we are seeing a paradigm shift from Web 2 through Web 2.5. So let's say Web 2 paradigm, but still encompassing some Web 3 elements, to a full Web 3 native model as the technology and the space matures.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. That's a really good. Thank you for that, because I think that does explain it. Because I don't know about you, but I receive a lot of pitch decks from like digital fashion designers or digital fashion platforms saying to me, we are a Web3 platform, or we are designing for the Web3. And then when you dig a little bit deeper, and you're just like, well, this is still Web2, actually. It's not even 2.5, it's still Web2. Like, and I think that is where the confusion starts coming about. I don't know if you ever get those pet sticks where you're like, this isn't Web3.
No, that's an excellent point, Peter. And of course, we kind of encourage those designers to kind of pursue their passion and ambition because it's an integral component of the space. But from a perspective of a technology investment, just using Web3 elements doesn't make you a Web3 company. However, if you can enable others to use those elements at scale, if you're building on protocols in a decentralized fashion, that is a true Web3 project. And only a Web3 technology product can reach the scalability that would get the intention of the VC investors. That doesn't mean that there is anything wrong with digital design services. There is still an immense opportunity for them to grow. But in terms of the interest from VC investors, we always look for that scalability that goes with the tech product that works when founders are asleep.
You know, I completely agree with that. And I think I agree with you in terms of the digital fashion designers. There's nothing wrong with that. There is a market opportunity for digital design studios for digital fashion. But it's about how do you then take it to that next level with that deep tech component that really makes you a Web3 platform of some sort, which I think is interesting.
In many ways, I like the comparison of an apple to an apple tree.
Yeah.
So we need to grow the apple tree to get more apples. A digital designer would be a symptom of all the technical advancements in the space. But for those companies and this creativity to grow and reach its full potential, the apple tree of standardized infrastructure and technology first needs to grow so the apples can blossom.
I'm going to use that apple tree analogy.
Please feel free to take it, yeah.
So then let's move on to Farfetch. As you mentioned earlier, obviously Outlier Ventures has partnered with Farfetch to create Dream Assembly Basecamp. How did that partnership come about, and what is the goal of the program?
Certainly. We've been friendly with Farfetch for quite some time, working on a host of initiatives together. But this particular program partnership converged at the perfect moment in the culture, where together we decided that we have a unique opportunity to bring the first of its kind program to market that fast tracks Web3 technology into the fashion space and luxury commerce. And I often call it a match made in Web3 heaven, because Farfetch has this eagle eye view, almost like a crystal ball in the luxury industry, and the view on its most pressing needs. They have always been extremely technology driven and fluent with Web3, but thanks to the partnership with OV, we can go much deeper on those Web3 elements and combine our joint track record of accelerating startups to support the new generation of builders that will define the future of luxury commerce. Farfetch was also absolutely instrumental in curating and building this world-class ecosystem of category-leading mentors that is an essential part of the program. And they're extremely present in the program from early days of the selection, formulating the pieces, to also Farfetch mentors and experts, senior executives working with teams directly to help them speak the language and get access to opportunities in the luxury space. So the goal is to set up teams in the program for success, both from the perspective of fashion industry and luxury commerce, as well as Web3 product technology across token economics, engineering, and other topics like that, everything that pertains to being a Web3 technology startups. And together we want to endorse those projects as the answer to the most prominent needs of the industry, help them build exposure in the space while giving them the tools to capitalize on the immense commercial opportunities that unfolds in front of them at this point in culture.
Let's talk about some of the startups you are working. So you've just released who is in Cohort 2 publicly. Actually, I was listening at a talk last week to Carol Hilson, who I believe you work very closely with. Is that correct?
Of course, Carol is the architect of the program.
Yeah.
The original Dream Assembly was her creation, and she's absolutely, I would say, the most important stakeholder of the Farfetch Dream Assembly Basecamp at Outlier Ventures, and also an amazing thinker and a knowledge leader in the space. So not only I work with Carol very closely, but it's also a tremendous pleasure and a learning experience for me.
Yeah. So it sounds like they have big ambitions with Web3 and Farfetch specifically. I always get a lot of startups that say to me, "Oh, I really want to work with Farfetch. I can wave my magic wand and suddenly they'll work with Farfetch." But obviously, from our previous conversations, I do know that you do have quite certain criteria to look at. So, for example, with Cohort 2, how did you decide on the final selection that you did, and what are those things that you are looking out for when you are working with a startup? A lot of our listeners are obviously founders that are looking to work with Farfetch.
Definitely. So, of course, as I mentioned, Farfetch is absolutely instrumental in setting out the thesis for the program and defining, let's say, the use cases and technology areas that we focus on. But then I would say also the OV track record of accelerating Web3 founders comes into play. And together, the key success factors that we kind of look for in each team, true for all founders, not only in fashion and luxury space, it's this conviction about your vision and resilience of founders combined with coachability and the readiness to adapt to your vision. The team needs to have both the builder capacity on tech and product front, but also the seller capacity on board through go-to-market, sales, hiring. If one of them is missing, that might stifle the growth of even the best vision. The team also needs to be able to communicate that vision even to market participants that might not be Web3 native. They need to be aware of the market dynamics and the timing, as well as gain intimate knowledge of their potential clients and audiences they're targeting to make sure they use cutting-edge technology to answer a real need. That's how you outperform competition. The project needs to be scalable. We already touched on that, and expand the space for everyone involved rather than being one of the symptoms of the space. And in order to reach that scale, usually the project needs to focus on a tech product rather than providing services. And the founders need domain expertise and the relevant network for that specific opportunity they're building towards. So, of course, in the Dream Assembly Basecamp program, Farfetch can help them navigate the waters of luxury industry in all of its aspects. OV can help with everything related to Web3 and the product. However, the specific domain expertise pertaining to the opportunity that the startup is after, that needs to come from the founders, and that's their strength to kind of showcase in the program.
Yeah. And then you, Blake, are you looking at it from an investor's perspective? Are you looking at it from a retailer's perspective on behalf of Farfetch? Or is it a blend of the whole thing together?
I would say it's a mix of all aspects together. Of course, Farfetch brings the commercial perspective, kind of represents the perspective of their clients and brands they work with. Whereas, of course, they're no strangers to startup investments, but I would say for OV, this has been our core focus. So we bring the investor and product view to the table, and together we make decisions as to which startups we can bring into the cohort as being a creme de la creme of the technology areas we identified as priority for the industry. Yeah. So I would say both partners are integral to this process and work very closely hand in hand to make every cohort a success.
Yeah. And then if you don't accept a startup in like a specific cohort, are you there then just to do like a sit and wait and see how they develop? Kind of like how I can like do with my startups that are applying to my venture studio. Like, okay, you're probably not ready to work with us, but we want to wait and see. Like, do you do that type of strategy as well?
Definitely, and of course, we're very serious about providing feedback to
Hmm.
startups that showed a lot of promise, but maybe we're not at the stage of maturity that would enable them to get the most out of the program. And of course, we stay in touch, we provide them with advice, and we always encourage them to kind of apply in the next cycle because I would say across the track record of OV, many projects follow that trajectory. They got on a radar where, let's say, maybe the product development was too early or there hasn't been enough of market validation. But as they matured throughout, a year, they stay on our radar and then they successfully entered the cohort. So I would say, even though, of course, we have some maturity requirements to enter the program, it's never too early to start talking to us and get on our radar because we try to grow the ecosystem for everybody. And even if we cannot bring you into the program at this point in time, we'll find the ways to support you and kind of give you some guidance in which direction to build.
Yeah, no, I like that piece of advice because I meet a lot of founders that they literally apply 2 weeks before the program deadline and then expect magic things to happen. But it's about making those relationships, if it's either with yourself or one of your team, like they should be understanding what you're really looking for much earlier on than the application deadline, I would say. And I think a lot of founders that I meet, they just leave it too late, really, to understand how can they work with you essentially. And because you have obviously two partners in the program, like it's also understanding Farfetch's objective as well. And that does take time to understand, to nurture those relationships and just to unravel actually what are the objectives for everything. So then in terms of what's the future of Web3 and fashion, Blake, if you could, rub your crystal ball right now. I did like what you said earlier in regards to luxury and data. Do you think that's going to apply to the entire luxury industry, or do you think it's more important for people like Farfetch at the moment to have that as one of their pillars to look into? Like, where do you think it's all heading?
So, with your example of luxury data economy, I think it's going to be huge for the entire luxury industry. But only Farfetch has that kind of early notion because of their scale and their vantage point on the entire industry. But of course, I cannot speak for Farfetch, and I would rather avoid any speculation about the future because as much as I would wish for it to be different, Peter, I do not have a crystal ball. But from my current observations, I think we are still at the early days of adoption with outstanding, diverse talent being attracted into the space. With time, we will see these solutions kind of turn away from maybe fields of just marketing and communication as they trickle down to strategy and operations of fashion and luxury brands. As big actors continue to explore the space, that builds momentum while the entire ecosystem matures and starts to intertwine with legacy fashion and luxury to bring about new paradigms, both for brands and for consumers. So having seen more than 500 applications to the program, we truly see an explosion of creativity unleashed by technology that is here to stay. And with time, I believe the brand adoption will only accelerate.
Yeah. So you mentioned there are 500 startup applications. How many startups have you had in the program to date?
So in the current program, we have 7 startups. So I would say for each cohort, our acceptance rate is about 3%. So
Okay.
it's quite a fit to get into the program. But of course, we try to provide thorough feedback to all the
Yeah.
applicants and kind of also help them navigate the process to maximize their chances of success. Um, so currently in the cohort that we have running, these are 7 amazing startups. If you'd like, I can share some more details about them.
Yes, yes, please. Like, why did you choose these specific startups?
Oh, we chose them because at first we saw the immense potential in the team,
Yeah.
but then we also saw that they're targeting a very specific opportunity that is at the core of the technology area that we identified, even if initially they didn't think the biggest opportunities in the luxury space. They kind of came to understand it throughout the program. And right now, I believe there are the answers to the most burning needs of the space. So just to give maybe a quick one-liner overview about each one of the projects, all of them amazing, but all of them different. D-commerce provides brands with infrastructure to host and engage their communities. Me Protocol provides special rewards infrastructure, enabling the cross-redemption of brand loyalty rewards. Netu Labs helps reduce carbon emissions and promotes sustainability to merchants and consumers with every transaction. Numbers Protocol is leveraging blockchain to track the provenance of digital media in the era of the race of digital generative AI. Soler is a plug-and-play white label API infrastructure to integrate with existing brand systems and enable on-chain commerce at scale. Spin by Lablaco is a system to connect digital twins to physical products, provide immersive retail experiences, and activate circular business models. And last but definitely not least, Woven is a Web3 native CRM platform for brands and creators economy to unleash the power of combined Web2 and Web3 data streams.
Yeah, so I think there's some very interesting startup lineup. I think what's interesting when I first initially read the list is I was like, oh, they're not necessarily inherently coming from fashion or retail first, but they can be applied to retail and fashion. I think that's very important for our listeners that are looking to work with you guys, is that you don't necessarily need to be, within fashion or retail to start off with, but it has to be applicable in some way, which I think is interesting because a lot of the founders that we work with, they think that they need to have all of that vertical situation figured out first before they can work with somebody like you, which is interesting. To put you on the spot, Blake, do you have a favorite yet?
No favorites. I love all of the teams in my cohort equally, and we provide, of course, custom-made support to each one of them. But I have huge hopes for each one of those projects, and I believe they're on track to achieve amazing things and kind of become a recognized technology brand in the wider fashion and luxury space.
Yeah. Perfect. So then just to finish off, how does somebody actually apply to the Dream Assembly Basecamp program?
So currently the program is running, but never hesitate to reach out if you would like to talk about your project. And as kind of Peter mentioned, how can your Web3 technology components be applied to the luxury and fashion space? Look out for our socials when we announce application open. Reach out to book office hours to discuss how the Farfetch and OV program can help add value to your startup trajectory, and make sure to keep an eye open on the current cohort and stay up to date with the latest program developments.
Yeah, and I think it's quite nice there that you do office hours, Blake, because not every program does that. And I think goes back to our earlier point, get to know who you are potentially working with as soon as possible. So on that note, thank you so much for your time, Blake.
Thank you so much, Peter. It's been such a pleasure, and thank you for the conversation today.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to click follow to keep up to date with the latest episodes. And if you like this episode, please give us a review. If you want us to feature a specific theme or guest, please give us a message at beyondform.io, and we'll see you very soon.